Welcome to the HMNS Beyond Bones Podcast, presented by the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Have you ever heard someone say dinosaurs are fake, fossils aren't real, or even that they're radioactive? I had the privilege of addressing these conspiracy theories, their origins, and so much more with our very own James Washington. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast and our YouTube channel, we'd appreciate your consideration. And please feel free to hang out with us in the comment section below if you are joining us on YouTube. But for now, just sit back, relax, and enjoy a conversation as fascinating as it is delightful. James, some people seem to think that even the mere act of digging for dinosaur fossils is reserved just for the elite. It's just the Illuminati and the Freemasons and the tall gray aliens that are allowed to even dig for dinosaur fossils. Who can dig for dinosaur fossils?
That is all correct. It is only the elite. I'm kidding.
Podcast is over.
Yeah, it's pretty much we're done. Take it off. The idea is very simple, that it depends on the states and the country's laws. So if you're in Mongolia, the fossils are patriated. So any fossil dinosaur found there, the government owns. America is different. So we have our, land rights and everything. So say you have property in South Dakota, Montana. You own this property, you find a fossil, it's your fossil. Say, for example, I go somewhere in Texas. Most of Texas is private property, so I have that permission. Our museums get permission from ranch owners. But the idea is that Texas, for example, if I am on a public land and I'm not in a park, state or national, I see a sea urchin or whatever, no one cares. But if it's a vertebrate animal, a dinosaur, prehistoric mammal, the state's like, no, that should go to what do you call the place in Austin, the repository in Austin. Oh. And so like the idea is that even I, as a museum person, like I dig with the museum, but if I go on the river and find a bone, I can't have that. I have to go give it to the proper place or things like that. So it's not that they're trying to keep it from you. It's just that these things, if they are on public land, it's owned by everybody technically, and state and government, federal government.
Right.
Yeah.
But Sue is such a great example. Like that is a whole muddy waters. You got to go Dinosaur 13 I think
movie,
on
yes.
Netflix.
I have a signed copy actually from Pete Larson. So.
Awesome. Yeah. I've worked with Pete Larson out in Wyoming, South Dakota. Amazing. So that goes to my next point. When we went out digging, and I'll probably splice in some B-roll from our 2022 dino dig, I'm just a random person. Yes, I work at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, but I'm a layman when it comes to digging for dinosaur fossils. We were with a group, the adult education group, just random people who came to dig for dinosaur fossils. And you don't, how can the common person, let's say someone who doesn't believe in dinosaur fossils or whatever, because they think for whatever reason, they're not allowed to go dig for dinosaur fossils. What path do they take so that they can go dig for dinosaur fossils themselves?
So our adult education program did the field trip, basically. So the Black Hills Institute and our museum are connected, at least business-wise. And essentially what happened was the rancher has property, and in that particular site, someone broke onto the ranch and was trying to take fossils.
Right.
And they were like, hey, we have fossils here. We should tell some institution somewhere. So they made a deal with Black Hills. We have our Houston friends, usually mean Houston guests.
Yeah.
They paid to go to dig. We took them as experts and showed them. And then the Black Hills essentially was our, they were hosting us there as well on this rancher's land with the proper channels, all of that. So for the average person to go and dig up dinosaurs, usually you have to go to a rancher, which is more difficult, or to usually a museum or institution, because we do the busy work for you. And the important thing is when we were digging, we didn't keep the fossils.
Right.
So like I don't dig up dinosaur. Every dinosaur I've dug up, I don't keep. The museum I dug with kept it, basically. Right. And so it's more the experience. But if there's something scientifically important, we don't want the average person just taking that fossil, because there's things we lose. I can't give names and species, but there was a fossil. We see feathered dinosaurs with predators like raptors and Tyrannosaur cousins. There was a feathered relative closer to duckbills and triceratops that was found in China. A private owner just had it for many years. They got older and gave it to a museum, and they were like, wow, this is a very important find. We could have known about it 20 years ago. We just got it more recently.
I see. So kind of what you're saying, what we're talking about right now are like sanctioned digs where they're all above board, because you're right. A random person can go out any random place in the world and find a fossil, not tell a soul about it, and have that fossil in their own personal collection. Maybe they don't even know what it is, but they can have it for decades. The reason why you go on sanctioned digs is so that the fossils are officially documented and can be officially studied and maybe determine what animal it goes to and whatnot. But what I'm getting at is somebody just listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube,
Okay.
anybody out of the thousands, hopefully millions of people that listen to and see this podcast, any random person watching can, if they know if they just email somebody, hey, can I come dig for fossils with you? Or where can I go dig for fossils? You can do it. Anybody watching this can go dig for fossils.
Yes, I don't want to give the impression that we are closing the door to everybody.
Like gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping. It's just that we want to know, like, we don't want just anyone getting fossils, because we can miss something scientifically.
Exactly.
And in the science community, it's a public trust that we have these fossils. And when you find something, everyone in the world who does what you research should have access to the thing to study it as well.
Right.
And so that's why we want to make sure we're all above board, as you say, so we know what's going on where it is. If you just go with some random place in Colorado and dig, first they have their own laws saying no.
Right.
But you might get something important and we'll never know about it. And that's why scientists share these things. And so, for example, if I want to write a paper on something that's held in a museum in New York, I can email them, make a set, et cetera. We want that kind of process instead of just it being in like your backyard as a doorstop kind of thing.
Right. So anybody watching, if you want to go find dinosaur fossils yourself or with a group, just what's your local natural history museum or the closest one, or anyone in the country, just reach out to your local museum even.
Yeah. Gem and Mineral Societies. I was in Dallas on a dig, and the Dallas Paleontological Society was digging as well. So they have these other groups you can join too as well. So there's groups in your area, trust me.
Right.
Don't just try to get a map and figure it out. And when you go with us, we will show you, like, here are the tools. Here's what we're doing. Here's the rock layer. Here's what it means, which is much more fulfilling for you than just hoping you find it.
Right.
You have someone there to show you and tutor you how to do it, basically.
And so speaking of finding dinosaur fossils, we live in Houston.
Okay.
When we dig in our backyard to put in a fence post, why don't we find a big T-Rex femur in our backyard a foot under our topsoil? Where are the dinosaur fossils?
So that's like a whole semester. But the idea is geology. So for the last, let's say, 200 years roughly, geologists have been going around the world looking at rock layers and mapping them out.
Yeah.
And so you may have seen these pictures. They look like abstract art, but they're actually rock units. And so, for example, the Houston area is Ice Age stuff and Holocene modern things. So the only dinosaurs in Houston are in our museum, basically, right? Mm-hmm. If you were to dig down, you could maybe find Columbian mammoth bones, you might find armadillo things, but you're not going to find dinosaurs here. So you have to go to other parts of Texas or like I do, Wyoming or Colorado to go dig.
Right. We're on the Gulf Coast. We're on the Gulf Coast where we're talking about where Houston is.
It's all new stuff.
New stuff.
For the most part.
But yeah, so Houston is on the coastal plains, coastal prairie here. So it has all the things that you just mentioned that are more recent in the time scale.
Yes.
Because the glaciers have receded and that's where we are.
Yes.
But you go out to other places in Texas. Where do you find the bigger boys?
So West Texas, and particularly for Tyrannosaurus rex and its relatives, Big Ben is where you find those guys. And so that's late Cretaceous rocks, right? And it's 8-10 hours from here where we are now.
Yeah.
And so that's where you see that. And so to give you a view on this, the Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas, that region of rock is all limestone from Cretaceous period. Texas was underwater for a long time, so we find oysters and fossils there.
Right.
And everything heading between Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas to the Gulf Coast is where it's been depositing out, as you mentioned earlier. But you have to go further in for those things.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens? Why are dinosaur fossils that used to be way buried down deep? Why in places like Wyoming and South Dakota and West Texas are they closer to the surface?
So the idea, in the case of Wyoming, during the age of Tyrannosaurus rex, we had an ocean that was kind of North American half.
Right.
And as the ocean's draining out, the Rocky Mountains are beginning to form. So they're uplifting those rocks, and it's pretty much like this, essentially, a very simplified version, and they're being eroded out. So you're having things that are very, very deep exposed to the surface and being weathered constantly.
Exactly.
Whereas here in the Gulf Coast, it's depositing on top of everything. So it's more mud and clay. I know when we had Harvey, there's
one
layer,
of them.
One of, yeah, I'm thinking.
One of them.
We have one of the thin layers of clay.
Yeah.
That when houses got flooded, people, this is black stuff, that was a clay layer that was depositing the marker bed for that hurricane. And so it's constant deposition here in the Gulf Coast. Right. Whereas in the Rocky Mountains, it's being uplifted.
Right.
So those fossils are being exposed and weathered out, basically.
So I've heard somebody recently, I was talking to my family, hey, they find ammonites on the top of mountains.
Yes.
That could only happen if a certain event occurred, whatever. I'm not judging nothing like that, anything like that. Mm-hmm. But the scientifically speaking, why you find ammonites in ocean fossils on tops of mountains is like we just discussed, because those weren't always mountains.
Mountaintops.
Once upon a time, I'll let you explain.
The way we say the word mountain. Any giant rock's a mountain to most people, but some of them are extinct volcanoes, true folded mountain systems, or when two continents crash together and make a mountain chain. So when Pangea forms, essentially, the Appalachian Mountains are forming in that crushing process. Same time we have Appalachians here, we have in Morocco the Atlas Mountains. Rocky Mountains forming after near dinosaur extinction time, right? And so it's these ocean deposits that were once buried being pushed up as continents push together. And I know for a person who doesn't study geology, this is like a lot to take in, but it's just that we look at this over time and see how this happens. And my first experience with this was geology. We were in Kerrville, Texas, on a hilltop looking at fossil oysters. My first fossil ever dug up was an oyster. And I knew the concept. Well, the professor, there's oysters in this hilltop. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah, but the Gulf is over there and we're in this hilltop in Kerrville. He's like, yeah, that was once the sea level was higher and all that.
Right.
And I knew it already on paper, but to see it in person was like, oh, this is how this works. There's an ocean above this area, Yeah.
And that's so beautiful. And that's what we're here to do. That's what museums exist to do. That's what education exists to do. Not everybody listening to this, not everybody watching this is a paleontologist or is a geologist. So this concept that an ocean floor or a riverbed was once an ocean floor riverbed, but now it is 8,000 feet in elevation above the nearest ocean, that's kind of a strange concept I'm a layperson, for any layperson watching this or listening to this. But that's what we're here to educate on. So if you have questions about that, you can ask your local museum. You can ask us. You can leave it in the comment section below. If this is on YouTube, you can send us an email, the podcast link, podcast@hmns.org. The resources are out there, and there are brilliant, I'm going to say beautiful educators.
We'll
like James Washington. Yeah, there's my quarter. Thank you very much. Got my kickback on that. I heard, speaking of YouTube comments and things, I get a lot of content ideas out of the YouTube comments. Thank you so much for the engagement over there on YouTube. Whether you're trolls or you're coming at us with more viciousness, whatever, it's all content. And in fact, this podcast was spurred by a comment that was coming out pretty spicy, coming out pretty hot against whatever we're teaching here. But I said, there's a lot of good little nuggets that we can talk about in the next podcast, including one that I personally a conspiracy that I had never heard of.
Okay.
Radioactive dinosaur bones, radioactive dinosaur fossils. Technically, they're not bones, they're fossilized, they're mineralized at this point. But that when the first dinosaur fossils were found, they were so radioactive that they had to be hidden from the public in lead boxes because they were radioactive. Can you speak to the radioactivity or conspiracy of radioactive dinosaur bones?
So first, I would like to point out the confidence that they entrust in paleontologists to be able to hide this away. Like, as soon as we find something, we're like, look at this in the newspaper, look at,
Yeah.
So I first came up with this idea too when for 10 years I was a head tour guide, staff tour guide. And usually the tour guides would come to me and go, oh, James, question. Within a week, I had 3 different tour guides say, are the fossils radioactive? So it's like something is going on in the zeitgeist.
Right.
So I began researching, and I concluded that the show Ancient Aliens had mentioned a dinosaur episode. And so they were suggesting that dinosaurs may have been wiped out by aliens to like bombs and things to make way for humans.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to comment on that. I will say this.
I'll comment on it. That is silly. I'll say that.
Okay.
All right, go on.
Well, I'm trying to be polite. I'm also at work, sir. See, there's a badge here somewhere.
Email me your complaints.
Yeah. But the idea here is that the Americans, we've tested bombs out west, and some fossils have picked up radioactivity.
Yeah.
So some paleontologists will use Geiger counters to find these fossils in certain areas. So that idea is true. But the first dinosaurs were recognized by Western scientists were in Europe. And so there wasn't a sense of hiding it. It was a sense of, well, what are these things? Let's understand this, basically. Right. And of course, it moved, to America. And so that connection was not quite what it seems. There are some that are radioactive. None of these are fine for, being in a museum won't hurt you.
I only have 2 eyes, not 3.
Yeah, I work here. I need to do fossils my whole life. I'm fine.
Although Gorgosaurus, there's evidence of brain cancer.
Yes, but not.
We're getting off track.
We didn't get it. Yeah. Okay. So.
Right.
But the idea is that's where that idea, I think, stems from more recently. But, and I say, well, you work in a museum. I have nothing to gain from this. Like, oh, they're not, or they are. It's like, we know this bombing happened. We were testing atomic material. Fossils are radioactive sometimes in certain situations, period. Right.
So that's where the rumor and the kind of conspiracy.
A resurgence of that idea. So the idea of they keep happening every now and then. There's certain things I'll just kind of see every now and then in the news and in social media, and that one kind of just appeared again. And I'm like, where did it come from? And now I know. And when that, and interesting enough, when that episode shows on TV again, I'll see the questions spike again about that question. So it's almost like I'll see like, okay, what was on last week? And there it was. So,
do you know of any dinosaur fossils that were ever painted in lead paint to contain the?
Not that I know. So
no, right.
I remember particularly, I work here and I volunteer with like 3 other museums. And so I did with different people and travel around. And I've asked people, not that question, but I did ask to make sure I didn't miss something in my education. Right. Do we do that? Now we do glue fossils together when they come fragmented or whatever, but there's no lead coating or anything like that from that concept now.
Can I go back to, there's part of the theory, and I'm not dogging on anybody. For me, it's just kind of, upsetting is not the right word, but I feel kind of bad, like, that this kind of misinformation kind of still exists when we have the access to all of information in human history at our fingertips. That, let's say 1800s, there were some nefarious characters that were hoaxing dinosaur fossils and things like that. But that was like 200 years ago. So why do you think that happened back in like traveling sideshows and on the rails and things like that? People hobbling together, look at this giant beast. And so that's where the seed of like dinosaurs are a hoax. And people in 2025, as of recording, still think dinosaurs are a hoax because of a 200-year-old one-off thing.
There are situations. Well, one thing to point out, whenever you see or experience something that gives you an intense emotional response, I always ask you to say, what would make someone want to do this?
Right.
So every so often on social media, I'll see this thing called a Diplocolus. It's like a salamander from the early Permian. They have triangle, like a boomerang-shaped heads. We have some here. I've dug some up before.
Yeah.
Every so often I'll see someone with a bucket, maybe made a model of one and put water in there and said, oh, I found this thing in this Texas river. And we know they went extinct like 250 million years ago, at least 280 million years ago. And there's none in the fossil record for a long time. And so I know that he said, well, why would they do that? Well, they're trying to get attention, movement, likes, et cetera.
Right.
And so the idea behind this is...
You're good. You keep going.
Okay. So the idea behind this basically is some people just have the motive to trick people or get attention or whatever.
Right.
For me personally, the way I kind of think of it is this, is that in our society, like, I say I love our fans because they have, quote, real jobs. You're doing accounting and business engineering. And we can be here and we can talk about dinosaurs and shoot videos and hang out. Yeah. And so it is kind of like our duty to answer these questions.
Right.
I often really encourage these kind of questions. And I know some people in my field are very annoyed by it, but to me, it's like you took the time to make a post to come out to ask these questions. You're here. Instead of just reading and going, oh, it must be true and not questioning it, right?
Right.
And so the idea of faking fossils, the few exceptions that are really well known are when people were trying to get attention or sell something. And luckily for us is like, we have a thing called peer review in science, where, you're in school, you write a paper, your teacher grades it, and peer review, you write a paper, the whole world of people who study your thing grade it. And it is the meanest mean girl situation of your existence. And when your paper survives that, then it's good. And so when we do talks, we are, I will tell you what I know has been tested and checked and tested. And so there's no reason for us to fake these fossils like this anymore.
Right.
Like we have several Tyrannosaurs, we have several Triceratops, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the shortest answer, sorry.
No, that's wonderful. Because it's exactly right. When people talk about, all the dinosaur bones are fake and they're a hoax, and who's benefiting from this in the year 2025 when you can test it? The paleo community is so
broke.
Passionate.
Passionate, yeah, that's the word.
That if we built a new specimen out of fake bones or whatever, and then try to pass it off as this real thing, the paleo community would descend like hounds to verify this claim, what we said, and within hours. I'm telling you, if we put a fake, so we have some of the real Y-Rex here behind us on display.
Yes.
You can come see it with your own face. You can get close enough to smell it. If you ask nicely, you can touch real dinosaur fossils here at our museum.
Not in the hall with the people in the...
Right, you go to the lab back there and they'll help you out. That's what we're here to do. But it's like, if we put a fake Y-Rex, what's the outside of the femur here? Not the femur, is it the tibia on the outside?
The tibia. The little one.
Tibia, exactly.
Yeah, tibia, yeah.
If we put a fake one on there, and said, this is the real bone, that hoax would be dismantled within hours. Like we couldn't fake it. It's the year 2025. All the science is there, and there's a very passionate community of scientists that would verify these claims. So what would we benefit, or any museum benefit, from trying to pass a hoax off as real? It's a rhetorical question.
Well, like I said, my tour, it was a big duck into cold water. Went from working in a college to being a tour guide manager, community tour. And so one thing to point out with this concept is the reason we put replicas out when we do is because they're rare. And so in some cases, like our Triceratops lane, the toes are so rare, they're off-site in storage. Because we know that you, listener, viewer, are respectful and won't try to grab anything, but not everyone holds those same tenets of personality. And so we have to put some things on display and off display. And so, or we might not have this bone from this animal, or we have the left one, not the right one, so we make a copy to, like that. So that's one thing to point out too. But I can tell you from experience, I had a special tour, and and when I did tours, it was very much like, here's what we found, here's how we know, here's who dug it up, here's our, and we got to the midway point, and the person asked James, do you really think dinosaurs exist? And for me, going from the first Precambrian to dinosaurs, like I had already explained all these processes. And I said, well, you people question when they lived because they don't understand the chemistry of the rock aging. But I told them, I have personally been to the mountaintop, uncovered new things, put them in plastic jackets, took them to labs. I've done that myself, and I have no reason to trick you. So I want to know too, right? And so he was like, okay, cool, like that. I was like, all right. So But I know there's a sense of distrust of.
And that's the day and age. So I completely understand the distrust, but there's so much misinformation and disinformation that's out there right now, like how, and AI and everything. How do you know what's real, what's not? I've had my own voice, even with me on camera. People question, is this an AI voice? Because I articulate, I guess. I didn't know that speaking was...
You have to use slang and bad grammar. That's
exactly.
How you know you're real.
I have to have, exactly. So the extinction event, 67, 68 million years ago.
Which one?
Exactly. Which flood? The Chicxulub meteor that hit in Chicxulub, Mexico, and killed the most life on Earth, a lot of life on Earth. Are crocodiles, let's be specific, are crocodiles descendants of dinosaurs? Where do crocodiles play in the whole genealogy of life on Earth? And why did they survive the extinction event?
So a lot to unpack, but condense. First of all, crocodiles are not descended from dinosaurs, birds are. Crocodiles are like the cousins of dinosaurs. They share a common ancestor in the Triassic period. The group we call Archaeomorphia, the whole group, but the crocodiles on one branch and dinosaurs are a different branch. And so that's the shortest way I can tell you.
Crocs aren't dinosaurs.
No.
They aren't dinosaurs.
Cousins. Like I always tell kids, like, do you and your cousins look kind of like or similar or something like that? Yeah. I actually had a group of kids once. I said, do you have any cousins? And the kids were like, no. I said, do you have parents? They're like, yeah. Do your parents have siblings? They go, yeah. Do they have kids? They're like, yeah. I'm like, those are your cousins, kids. It's like, I had to walk them through the thing.
It's cute.
So, but the idea was that crocodiles are dinosaur cousins. They have they're a common ancestor, but different branch. They survive, we believe, because when the crocodile, it's kind of, when you are a fast, active animal in your environment, any kind of changes affect you more than a slow, swamp-dwelling, low. A lion is eating so many animals a day, right? Or so many animals per week. A crocodile can go almost a year without eating. So that's something to point out too. So when the event happened, the extinction event happened, what makes it so important or unique is that it was such a short event. Most of the extinctions before were longer, prolonged, less obvious. This one was, a strike, volcanoes, lots of activity. And so the idea here is that if you were a certain size and you don't have to eat very often and you can go dormant and hide out or burrow in the ground, those are things that often help things survive. And if you were a T-Rex or even some small dromaeosaurs, it's harder to do those things. You need more food. I always say, kids, you wake up hungry, right? Because you're warm-blooded, you have more food. If you're a crocodile, you can wait it out, right?
Exactly. And that's one theory of how mammals became dominant. Not dominant, but flourished
We're
after.
Pretty dominant now.
I'm a mammal, and we're learning about ourselves.
We have plastic.
Exactly. we have microplastics that are running through our bodies right now.
Also, it's a sign of our greatness.
But rodents.
Yes.
Extinction event. Boom! The sky is on fire. The whole world's on fire, and then the winter afterwards for an extended period of time. Early mammals, as I understand it, as a layperson, just globbing onto y'all smart people, were burrowers, like rodents. They could escape it, and they could hibernate, and they could go dormant a little bit for a while, at least escape, at least have a better chance of survival, because a big, slow T-Rex is just exposed to the fire and to the heck on earth after that, versus a croc can only needs to eat once every several months or whatever, and can go dormant somewhere, go under the water where it's safe and more temperate and cool and not on fire or too hot. And early rodents could do a similar thing where they could burrow underneath.
Yes. One thing to point out, two things to point out. One is you're looking at, there were turtles and there were birds and there were mammals that died out too. I think we kind of think it was just the dinosaurs and ammonites.
And then mammals,
yeah,
right,
but
exactly.
The thing is, it's reproduction. So think of it this way. An elephant, for example, 23 months pregnant, right? Mm-hmm. Think about a rabbit. And that very extreme example, but like they can reproduce so quickly. And so it's not only that these mammals can hide, but they can have more babies quicker, faster, and like that.
Right.
So those are things that it's something that you don't really think about on the day-to-day life. But I mean, the roaches win. There's just more of them than like elephants and whales, right?
I didn't think about that until this is what's so beautiful about talking to James Washington. I didn't even think about that. That one key to survival of an extinction event is the ability to have lots of babies quickly.
Yes.
And increase the odds that your species survives.
Yeah, and when people hear survival of the fittest, people assume fitness means you are stronger, faster, smarter. Fitness in an evolutionary sense is how many offspring you have. And so if you have so beetles and ants are very fit, elephants and whales are not.
Yeah.
And so I think I had a friend of mine, they're having a child, and I said, congratulations on increasing your fitness. And they're like, they were science people too, so they're like, we get it,
Yeah, so, James being James.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just when you're friends with a robot.
Thank you for ruining our whatever.
No, but but if you look at it, it's just what it is. And so these animals, their fitness is that they have more offspring.
Here's how we'll end the podcast, with a mind-blowing fact that I know some people know and a lot of people don't, because it blew my mind. We live closer, you and I, James Washington, everyone watching and listening to this podcast, we live closer in time to this Y-Rex than this Y-Rex lived to Stegosaurus.
Yes.
Stegosaurus, I know in movies and Land Before Time and Jurassic, all the things, it shows the dinosaurs together. Stegosaurus fighting a T-Rex,
Fantasia.
They are so far apart in the timeline. They are found in so far in different layers. They did not exist together.
No.
And we are closer to the T-Rex layer than the T-Rex was Stegosaurus. That's mind-blowing. You just think of them all living together, and they did not.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm really into studying the different levels and everything. Mm-hmm. And so people often don't realize that, like, by the time the T-Rex is walking around, all the Stegosaurs have been extinct and are fossilized.
Are fossilized already. They're already
so there may have been times where
bones.
Dinosaurs were walking around and saw other fossilized dinosaurs early periods.
Yeah.
And I know this is weird for if you put the lay person, but part of being a paleoscience or even history person is deep time. Mm-hmm. And so the example I give you more, kind of jumping off of this, kind of like how in human culture, when Alexander the Great went to Egypt and looked at the pyramids, they were 2,300 years old before him. And he is 2,300 years from us. Mm-hmm. So again, you see that thing where like we're looking at how old the pyramids, well, at least the Giza pyramids are. Right. But it's kind of like, and that's something that the average person doesn't really think about because you're living your life, you're getting your coffee, you're going to work. Right. But we have the luxury, thanks to viewers like you, to sit and think about this kind of deep time thing. And it's like, wow, like Stegosaurus, they were all Stegosaurus in general were gone by the Cretaceous period. It's like, oh, that's cool, right? I know. And while we still got battery life, I keep coming up with like one last topic. I've heard it mentioned a misconception. Why were dinosaurs only discovered in the late 1800s? My understanding is that's just the first time we were able to identify that that's what these bones were. Humans had been finding dinosaur fossils in megalodon teeth and things like that since antiquity. Yes. In memoriam, we've always found dinosaur fossils. Yes. It's just science got to a level where we could say, this is what this is now. Now we know what this is, not a dragon's tongue. This is a megalodon's tooth. Yeah. And that in modern science is very young. And so the word dinosaur was coined in 1842. So before Richard Owen coined the term dinosaur, there was no word for that we knew. So when George Cuvier, a paleontologist in France, he was working with Native Americans or indigenous people in Americas, they were finding these things, interpreting them too, but they didn't leave records that we can look at today. Right. And so that's a really good question. It's a really good thing. And I'm glad you brought it up because people in the ancient world were seeing these bones and trying to interpret them too.
Right.
They just weren't modern scientists. They didn't have digital papers to send to each other to check.
Right.
So you hear all, these stories of these things, or we'll see this. And whenever I see when people there's like the caves, I think in South America, where they have like the jars with dinosaurs on them. And I'm not an anthropologist, I'm not going to speak on that in that way, but the dinosaurs they have on them are species that are all known to the public and didn't live in that time period, that region.
Right.
So I personally think on that alone that somebody made these in recent time, because we didn't have that kind of like stegosaurs around South America. And they have stegosaurs and thing with the brontosaurus and triceratops here. I'm like, those are animals that aren't found in South America.
And I also think people have imaginations. Napoleon Dynamite was drawing a liger, and they have imagination. So let's say 20,000 years ago, a human drawing on a cave or something, what looks like a stegosaurus.
Yes.
It could be that they found, them or their tribe or whoever, or their ancestors had found a stegosaurus fossil, like maybe an articulated stegosaurus that's stuck in their minds. And so now they're drawing it from the bones they saw, not a real stegosaurus, living, breathing stegosaurus, but they found the fossils. Just like we find fossils today, they had no context for it other than wow, what's this crazy thing we found? I'm gonna draw my stick figure next to it on a cave wall or on some sort of piece of art. It doesn't necessarily mean that humans lived with the stegosaurus. It just means that humans at that time found the fossilized stegosaurus bones, didn't know what it was, but drew it because it was a fantastical thing. Yes. You get stories of dragons and all this stuff that it boils in the imagination based on a real thing. You don't know what the real thing is called yet, other than it's incredible. Have their own, maybe they did have their, exactly. Yeah. They didn't know it as a stegosaurus today. They found it. So we've been finding dinosaur fossils since as long as humans existed. It's just in the 1800s we were able to let's call it something. Let's call them dinosaurs, and let's study it within this new context that we understand.
Yeah, the same. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, biology is exploding with the nomenclature of different species and genus and all that. So it's all happening around the same time, and we today are living on that system.
Right.
Who knows? And I'm always thinking weird. Who knows if we have some kind of cataclysm, meteor impact, whatever, and in 400 years, people look at our freeway systems that are kind of crumbled.
Yeah.
Think of the Roman aqueducts. We see them and think that between the aqueducts and what we call the Dark Ages, they looked at that and said, look, someone before did that.
Right.
One day someone might look at those freeways and go like, someone before did that.
Exactly.
And then see these museums, their temples maybe, humans are constantly interpreting things, right?
We're constantly interpreting things, and we're constantly figuring out what things are that have already existed. So a good term I like to do it, and we can wrap it up with this notion, is that lightning was always electricity. Lightning was always electricity. Benjamin Franklin just figured out that lightning was electricity. We just developed our brains and science to be able to determine and test, okay, this is electricity.
And how to use it later on.
And then how to use it to run our cameras and our microphones and things like that. So, James Washington, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Fine, sir. I feel like I need to bow to you.
No, you don't.
Or like curtsy or.
I'm really strong on democracy and not imperialism. So
Well, if I had a hat remove, I would tip it to you.
Like the thing I always do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you so much for watching and listening. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
If you're joining us on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us in the comments. If you're listening to the podcast in your favorite podcast app, please rate us and share it with your friends. Be sure to check the description in case there are any links and goodies, and feel free to drop us a line at podcasts@hmns.org. And with that, as always, thanks for listening, stay curious, and come visit us at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. Take care, y'all.